All right, we are on Daf Gimel, the last line on Bet Amud Bet. Today, this Daf, we're going to be continuing the comparison between Mavoi, the way that we enclose an alleyway, and the requirements of that, compared to Sukkah, and compared to the Mishkan and Bet HaMikdash. So what we saw yesterday is the opinion of Rav, who said that the derivation of the maximum 20 amot high for the crossbeam and the maximum 10 amot wide that an alleyway can be, in order for it to be considered enclosed, we derive those, which is Rabbanan, we derive those measurements from the Hechal of the Bet HaMikdash as described in Masechet Midot. Okay, so we are going to ask a question on him as follows. Ela me'ata la tehane la amal tera, dehaichal amal tera havyale, afilu hachi asrim amma hu de gaboa. We're asking about from this amal tera, which is, if you look on the picture here, it's a design on top of the doorway. Here's some kind of a step design that sticks out. And what we're going to see, the whole point of this crossbeam is to bring people's attention to say, oh, there's a crossbeam. This is a divider. So if I'm carrying here in the alleyway, I better stop at this divider and not carry into the Reshut Rabim. That's the whole point of this crossbeam. So the maximum 20 amot is because people don't usually look. It's not beyond their eyesight to see something that's more than 20 amot high. But if it's something that's decorative, like this, then even higher than 20 amot should be permissible, as we're going to see in a second. Okay, so that's our assumption, is that it should be permissible. However, according to Rav, who says we learn it from the Hechal, yet the Hechal had such a amal tera, and yet it was only 20 amot high as the Petach. And so really it could have been more if it was because it has this decoration. How do we know that it had such a decoration? Itnan hamesh amal teraot shel melahayu al gabav zo lema'la mizo zo lema'la mizo. In Midot it says that there were 5 these oak protrusions, one on top of the other. So we know that there was such a thing in the Hechal. So yet it was only 20. We just hold on a second. This is a little tangent. Why are you asking from this? Perhaps that Mishnah was talking about the ulam, the entranceway, not the door of the entranceway, not the doorway to the Hechal. And so the door of the entranceway is not important for Rabbanan. That was only for Rabbi Yehuda. Hold on, that's not a problem. Perhaps they're the same, and both had. If one had, then the other had. They probably matched. There's good architecture for them to match. So we're asking, although we're asking from a dilma, which is strange because if it's just maybe, so you could answer maybe not. But the presumption is that there was, in fact, this kind of design on the Hechal, and therefore we ask a question to this statement of Rav. Alama amar Rabbi El'a amar Rav. Right. So Rav said the width of the beam has to be 4 hand breadths, even if it's not very sturdy. Okay, that's not relevant for us. Okay, here's the key. Rav here says that if it has a design, a amal tera design, then the height of the mavoi can be even more than 20. But the problem with that is, since Rav learns this from the Hechal, and the Hechal had amal tera, yet that was only 20. So that is the contradiction, right? Is it only 20 even with amal tera? Or what he says here, that with amal tera, it can be more than 20. Okay, that's the question. Now we're going to answer it by disassociating Rav from the statement. Amar Rav Yosef, amal tera matnitahi. This is, I know you quoted it in the name of Rav, but actually it has an older source. It's actually a baraita. Man katanila. Who is the author of the baraita? Is it a valid one? Yeah, this sage taught this baraita. Okay. Hold on, you didn't get Rav out of trouble yet, because we had a contradiction of two statements of Rav. Now you're telling me that one of them is a baraita. All right, that doesn't help because Rav still has to answer to a baraita. Yeah, once in a while we say Rav Tanahu Palig, he's the first generation, he's a very high authority, but we don't like to jump to that statement if we don't have to. So we still have a problem between the two. Rav could answer you as follows. Dal ana mehacha. Take me out of the picture, right? Don't involve me between this in this problem because matniyata milakashan hadadeh. There are two baraitot, and the two baraitot are contradictory to each other. So it's not my problem. Elamai itlach lememar ana ehe hi ledidina me ana ehi. Right, so it's machloket tanaim. So I'm going to follow one. I have to follow one or the other. So what are the two baraitot? One is a baraita that we saw yesterday that compares the opinion of Rabbanan, who said the maximum 20, to the Hechal, which also maximum of 20. And that would mean a maximum of 20. Even if you have an Amal Terah ornament, it doesn't matter because the Hechal had an Amal Terah ornament, but that was 20. So therefore the max should be 20. And the other baraita is one we just saw here, that if there is an Amal Terah, then it can be even more because that decoration will draw your eye upwards. And so that's the machloket tanaim. The machloket tanaim. Rav says, I just followed the first one. Okay, so that's not a problem for Rav. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, however, says something interesting. He disagrees with Rav. And he says, Belo Rav batniyata tadeh lakashyan. No, it's Rav's interpretation that is causing these to be contradictory. And I have a different interpretation according to which the two baraitot are not contradictory. The Rabbanan, Korah Tamamai, Mishum Hekera. The rabbis are saying that according to the rabbis, who say 20, the purpose of the Korah is only that there should be something noticeable. It's not really a wall or anything or a doorway. It's just a sign. And we're going to see this in general throughout the Masechet. These things, are they considered a sign? So the point is just to see it, or is it some kind of symbolic wall and door frame, in which case the requirements are going to be different. So he says, it's just heked. In that first baraita that compared the mavoi to a hechal, that's just a siman. It's just a mnemonic device telling you the number 20, that is usually the max for mavoi. We have that number elsewhere. Also regarding hechal, the number is 20. And so that's where you remember it. But not all the halachot are the same, right? We're not going to derive just because this has Amal Terah and this can't have an Amal Terah, right? We're not going to derive all of the details one from the other. So whereas Rav compares them and says that the hechal is the origin, is the source for mavoi, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says that these are different laws. It's just a mnemonic. Mavoi is a sign, and therefore it's different. And because if I have an Amal Terah, I have something fancy that will draw my eye upwards and be a sign, therefore then I can make it even higher. Okay,
so Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is just saying that if without Rav there's no issues.
Right, without Rav there's no issues between those two baraitot, because the first baraita that compares it to mavoi is not making a serious conceptual comparison. It's just saying the number 20 is here, the number 20 is there. That's all.
Okay.
And therefore, because it's not a conceptual, right, so the concepts are different. Therefore, mavoi is a sign. So anything that your eye will notice is good. Usually your eye notices things up to 20 amot, right? We'll see that in Sukkah also. In Chanukah, right, the Chanukah menorah has to be below 20 amot, because otherwise people don't see it. That's a universal halacha. But if it's something special, there's an ornament on it, their eyes are going to be drawn up even higher than that, right? So that's a halacha of siman. Okay. Well, what he said is fine if he doesn't agree with Rabbah. Well, what did Rabbah say? Let's see. So there's a halacha in sukkah that the Torah is giving a reason why you have to build sukkot so that you'll know that you were in a sukkah. But Abba is emphasizing that while you're in the sukkah, you actually have to think about that. And you have to recognize, I am sitting in a sukkah because of this. So you have to see the schach while you're sitting in the sukkah. עד 20 אמה אדם יודע שדר בסוכה, למעלה מ-20 אמה אין אדם יודע, משום דלה שרתה בעינה. Because you have to, it's not enough to just sit in the sukkah, you have to be aware of the roofing of the sechach. That's why the schach has to be 20 amot or lower. Above that, you don't even realize where you are. You may as well be outdoors because you're not going to see the schach. So therefore, now we see the problem that the issue of mavoi and sukkah are the same. Both of them are meant to be not a wall or a frame or door frame or anything. Both of them are meant to be a sign. Both the mavoi, that beam, and the schach are meant to be something that you should see, and when you see it, you will be reminded of something. The mavoi will remind you that this is the separation between the Reshut HaYachid and the Reshut HaRabim, and the sukkah will be a reminder that you're sitting in a protective sukkah, just like the Israelites in the desert. So they're both things that you have to see. Okay, why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem because if they're the same point, then why does the Mishnah need to teach both? Mishnah is succinct, and it could just say, this is a heker, this is a siman. If I know the siman, I'll go look over there and find the other one. It could just say it in mavoi, and I can derive from sufra to sukkah, or the other way around, right? And so what we saw yesterday, that similar language between the two Mishnayot that we asked about yesterday is now coming back to bother us. So why do we need both? Okay, so now we're going to answer that. Why we do need both? There are different. These laws are different. Siricha diash me'ainan gabe sukkah v'hakama Rabbi Yehuda kevan dedishiba abida shata be'aina. For Rabbi Yehuda, who says it can be even higher than 20, so Rabbi Yehuda would have to say it regarding sukkah. Because since in sukkah you're sitting there and you're there for a long time, you're sitting and having a meal. So even something more than 20, he would say, I'm going to notice it, right? Whereas but if I didn't say it in both contexts, if I didn't have the law machloket mentioned in mavoi, I would have said that regarding mavoi, I'm just walking. I'm walking pretty fast. I'm not sitting there, and so there's no way I'm going to notice. So I might have thought that even Rabbi Yehuda would agree with Rabbanan that 20 is the max regarding mavoi. That's why I need to say the law that regarding mavoi that even Rabbi Yehuda thinks that higher is enough. And the flip side, if I only had the law, the machloket mentioned regarding mavoi, Rabbanan, and then I would say only in mavoi does Rabbanan say maximum of 20. But regarding sukkah, where I'm sitting down for a while for a meal, maybe Rabbanan would agree with Rabbi Yehuda that it can be even higher than 20 because I'm there for a long time. So that's why I need to say it in the two contexts. So now we resolve that problem for the Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, that he can explain even according to Rabbah, this is a heker, that's a heker, but still we need both. All right, back to this amal tera. What is it? My amal tera, this decorative protrusion. Rav Hama beret Rabba bar Abu Amar Kine. He says it's some kind of a bird's nest, a wooden, carving of a bird's nest that you put up there. It would be very nice. People would want to look at it. It's a cedar pole. It's some kind of a long pole that's sticking out, a cedar, beautiful wood. If you think that the cedar pole is enough to draw one's attention, then you can make it higher than 20. Then all the more so, this fancy bird's nest that's engraved out of wood is even nicer to look at. So for sure, that would permit one to make it higher than 20. But one that says just cedar wood would say that. The one who says it's a bird's nest, that would work. but he would not agree that the cedar would because that's much less noticeable. What's the reason that the cedar poles draws people's attention? Well, I guess because it's very long. It's this long, protrusion that's coming out. Hold on, but a sukkah is also very long. It's usually it's a big thing. The schach, it's not just a little pole; it's a big area. And if you think that the cedar pole sticking out would allow mavoi to be higher than 20, then a sukkah in general should always be able to be higher than 20. No, it's not just that it's long and sticks out. It's also because it's made out of cedar. It's very beautiful. It's very fancy. Everybody knows. You look up at that nice protrusion. So it's also what it's made out of. Okay. Miksat kora betoch esrim or miksat kora lemala me'asrim. Now we're dealing with the following case of what happens is like this. Let's say I have a mavoi here, and this is 20. And I have the korah, right? And what if it's part of it is under 20 and part of it is over the 20 mark, right? What would be the law? And similarly, we're going to compare it to a sukkah, where a sukkah is 20 amot high and the schach is half above the line and half below the line, right? What's the law in such a case? Miksat schach betoch esrim, miksat schach lemala me'esrim. What's the law? So Rabbah splits the difference. He says, if in a case of mavoi, and it's half up, half higher, the beam is half higher and half lower, that's okay. But a sukkah, it's not okay. It has to be all within the 20 amot. It can't be not any of it can be above the 20 amot. All right, so that's strange because until now, we've been comparing them and they've been very similar. So why is it different in this case? So why do you say that regarding mavoi half up and half down is okay? Well, you know what? We can make a kind of a legal fiction. Let's imagine that we thinned out cross beam, the part that's on top. Right? In this case, imagine that the part that's above 20 is not even there. Right? So it's just added material. Make believe it's not there. Well, then that's not a good answer because sukkah name lema kilosh. Sukkah also, imagine that whatever is above 20 is not there. Why should it detract? Well, no, you can't do that. In the sukkah, there's a general rule that the schach has to be thick enough that there's more shade than sun. It's got to be 51% shade. Now, if I would imagine, in my imagination, take off that top that's above 20 amot, then I'm taking away a lot of the shade. And now I'm not going to have more shade than sun. And so it wouldn't be kosher anymore. Hold on, but that's still not a difference. In the mavoi also, if I take off the top a bit of it, that's above 20, then it's going to be very weak beam. And a weak beam, one that can be blown away by the wind, is not a good beam. It's got to be something substantial. I'll make a legal fiction and I'll imagine as if that the cross beam of the mavoi, even though the image is thin, let's imagine it's made out of steel. Even if it's really just made out of wood or something, I'll imagine as if it's made out of steel, and therefore it would be strong. That also doesn't make a difference. So in the sukkah also make that same legal fiction and say, imagine as if the schach that's below has more shade than sun. So in the end, we don't understand why there should be a difference. Rabbah here, who says in similar cases, when we have a mavoi, the crossbeam, half above and half below 20, he says it's okay. And sukkah, he says pasul, right? So we tried a lot of different ways and we couldn't figure it out. So finally, we have two reasons that do work. Amar Rava mi parzak ya sukkah di leachid hi. The difference is sukkah usually is a private sukkah. I know sometimes today we have a communal sukkah and a bet knesset, but most of the time people had a private sukkah. So since sukkah is just my private one, so if you would remove, theoretically remove that top part, or sorry, if the bottom part, let's say the part that's below 20, would fall away and wouldn't be there anymore, an individual wouldn't be so careful to make sure to fix it. But a mavoi is for the public. And so someone who's walking along the way will notice, oh, the part below 20 is rubbed away, is missing. And so someone will fix it. So that's the reason why mavoi, which is public, people will take care of it. And so you could be more lenient than sukkah, which is private, and you have to take care of it yourself. Ravina Amar, another reason, Sukkah deoraita, achmiru barabanan. Mavoi rabanan, achmiru be rabanan. Sukkah is a deoraita law, and therefore we have to be stringent. And so this case of half in, half out, we're going to be stringent and say no good. All the schach has to be below 20. But mavoi is all thing is the rabanan, so we can be lenient in that case and assume, all right, part of it is within the 20, so that's good enough. Okay, so we answered the question. We answered that. Now we have something very interesting. We're going to flip this all around, and we're going to flip Rabba's statement around. Rabba bar matana matne la lahashmata Rabba ipecha amar Rabba b'mavoi pasul b'sukkah keshera. Okay, same comparison. We have these sukkah mavoi that's 20 amot high, and on top we have something that's half below 20 and half above 20. And now Rabba says the opposite. The mavoi is no good, and the sukkah in such a case is good. All right, now we're going to go through this whole discussion, but we have to figure out how to argue from the same arguments, but the other way around. So this is a fantastic rhetorical exercise here. So why is the sukkah okay? Well, we can imagine it's thinned out, right? We just thin out the part that's on top. Mavoi also, imagine that the top part isn't there. No, mavoi, if you take out the top part, it's going to be weak and then the wind will blow it away. And sukkah also, if you imagine it to take away the part that's above 20, then there'll be too much sun and not enough shade. So when I say in Sukkah, we can imagine a legal fiction, and we'll make it as if there's a shade there, even though there wouldn't really be, because there is shade there. So we'll make the same legal fiction by mavoi and imagine that it's made out of metal. Okay, so all that, again, doesn't help us, but we still have the same two answers. But now look how we're going to ingeniously flip them around. Amar Avami Parzakta, Sukkah Didachidhi, Rameh Nafshe Umidkar. The sukkah, if you have something that's half below 20, the schach is half below and half above 20, and then some of the one below 20 gets rubbed away, falls out. An individual, sukkah is an individual thing, because a person has it in his own home. Individual will be responsible and make sure his sukkah is okay. Whereas mavoi, the l'rabimhi, samcha dadeh, v'la mitkare. But since mavoi is a collective responsibility, there's no one person responsible. So everybody's going to assume someone else will take care of it. Someone else will take care of it, right? This is the famous story of Kitty Genovese, right? Where there was a murder in the middle of a courtyard, and there were dozens of people who saw it and saw the whole thing, and nobody called the police, right? Not because they were bad people, but because there were so many people there, everyone assumed, I'm sure someone else called the police. Right? Whereas in the case where it's just one person, you're the only person that sees a crime, for sure, right? You would call the police. So that's so we have this is a famous psychological study, but the source is right here in this in Eruvin Daf Gimel. And it's actually a popular saying. Right? A pot that belongs to partners is never going to get hot, never going to get cold, right? Because if we're going to eat it and we both want it hot, I'm going to assume the other guy will take care of it. He thinks I'm going to take care of it, right? This is the email problem. If you send an email to two people, you'll never get a response, right? Because the people are receiving out, the other person will respond. If you want a response, you got to send it to only one person. Okay, so this is a great psychological principle that we see here, and that's one reason. And the other reason, Ravina also applies the opposite way. So before we said sukkah is doraita, and therefore you have to be stricter. Now we're saying the opposite. Since the sukkah is doraita, the rabbis don't have to add a stringency. It's stringent on its own. Everybody knows doraita. They're going to be very careful. But people will say mavoy. It's only the banan. It doesn't matter. We're not going to fix it. It doesn't matter if if part of it fell off, right? And so therefore the rabbis have to be stringent on mavoy and say the whole thing has to be below, so that people will take care of it well. Okay, this is a great example of, any logic, you can always turn it around and argue the other way, and the Talmud is very talented at doing that. Okay, so okay, we just went through a lot of theoretical argumentation, which is really fun, but halacha l'maaseh, what is the law? Rabba amar bar Rav Ula amar zeh vazeh pasul. Rava amar zeh vazeh kasher. Okay, so we're not going to follow either of the opinions we just saw. Rather, one, Ula says both are no good, when it's half and half out. Rava says both are okay. Halal sukkah tenan, halal mavoy tenan. Rava is going to prove it from this fact that we're talking about the halal, the empty space of sukkah, an empty space of a mavoy. The empty space can be 20, right? And so therefore, I'm allowed to have 20 empty space. And the sukkah can be right above 20. It doesn't have to lessen the 20, right? Why would it have to have the whole thing within 20? Or the cross beam? Why would it have to, if it's within 20, then the space is less than 20. But the Mishnayot both said the space can be 20. Therefore, you can have space of 20 and the divider above that. Okay, that's his proof. Tanya, the Messiah, I have a baraita that helps you, Rav Papa says to Rava, as teacher. Mavoy shehu gavoa me'asrim amma yoter mipitcho shel hechal yema'ed. This is a baraita we saw before, that they have mavoy that's more than 20, like the hechal, should be lowered. Hechal gufo halalo asim. So you're comparing it to the hechal. The hechal was 20 in this space, and the crossbeam was above 20. And so therefore, this, if you're learning it from hechal, and from the hechal, it's the same. Itibe Rav Simi bar Avashe. Papa. Hold on, but now we have a challenge from a Tosefta. Kesad haya oseh manech korah misefat 20 ulemata. It says, how do you actually make this cross beam? You take it from the edge, and you go misefat 20 from the edge of 20 and below. This sounds like, if you just read it naturally, it sounds like the top of it is at 20, and then the rest of it is lower than 20. So that does seem like a problem. Ema ulemala. Says, no, change the word, make it mesifat esrim ulemala. Okay. Well, the Gemara doesn't like that. Halimata ketani. It says below. You can't just change the word to mean the opposite. So that's not a good answer. Akamash malan ilamata kilamala. Malimala halala esrim. Aftamata halala esrim. Okay, leave the word as it is. He's going to interpret it in another way. You have to put it the beam at 20, similar to the minimum size below. In other words, the minimum size below, a shortest sukkah, is 10 tefachim. So if you have 10 tefachim and then you have schach within 10 tefachim, that's no good, right? You can't have that. Like, could you imagine such a thing? Let's say you had a schach that was 5 tefachim thick, and there was all below 10 tefachim, then the space would only be 5 tefachim. That's too small, right? That would not be the minimum. Rather, just like the minimum is I'm allowed 10 tefachim of space, and then the schach on top, so too the maximum is 20 amot, and the schach above that. So that's what the word ulemata means. It's coming to compare the maximum to the minimum. And so, in fact, it can be all above. Okay, now we're going into a new subject, which is amma. We just talked about 20 amot, right? Amma we define as an arm length, but there are actually two different definitions. It's not just an arm length. We also compare what different measurements to each other. And so amma is defined in terms of hand breadths as well. How many hand breadths? Well, there's two different definitions. Sometimes it's 5 and sometimes it's 6, right? I don't know, you can measure on yourself how many hand breadths can fit into your arm length. but we're going to see the slightly different hand breadths also. So this could get very complex. So usually we assume 6 hand breadths, but here Abaye is saying, in the name of Nachman, amat sukkah amat mavoy ba'ama bat hamisha. These are smaller amot that are only 5 hand breadths long. Okay, that's going to be a chumrah in this case, right? Because that means that the tallest sukkah of 20 amot are shorter amot, right? So if an amah usually we think is 1.5 feet, this might be only 12 inches. Or no, if it's usually 18 inches, maybe this is 15 inches, right? Okay, so this is going to be a chumrah. That tallest thing is going to be even shorter. Amat kilayim b'ama bat shisha. However, for the laws of kilayim means if I have a vineyard, I'm not allowed to plant grain in it. I have to make a separation. I have to put the vineyard here, then I have to have a separation, and then I can plant the grain in another place. So how big is that separation? When I want to measure that, I have to use the larger amot of 6. So that's also a chumrah, because now I have to leave more space. So in other words, he's saying always be machmir in depending for calculating which amot you're going to use. Amat mavoy bama bat hamisha. So let's analyze. We're going to analyze each one in turn of all the things he said. So for the height of the mavoy and also for the width, right? How big of a breach in a wall was be considered a breach. So we're going to use the smaller amot. That's going to be a chumrah. Hold on, there's another law regarding a mavoy which says that the width of the mavoy, in other words, going into it, how big of the mavoy going into it has to be at least 4 amot. That alleyway, the length of the alleyway has to be at least 4 amot for it to be considered a mavoy. And if you're going to use a smaller one, for that, then you're going to get a kula. You're actually going to end up with a leniency, and that's also a law of mavoy. Oh, it could be that he says that the length of the alleyway is based on 4 hand breadths, not based on 4 amot. And so in that case, it would be based on hand breadths and has nothing to do with amot. So that's one way out. Or maybe he does say 4 amot, and he's not including this law. He's saying you use the smaller amah for most of the laws of mavoy, but not for all of them. He's really going to be machmir all around. Okay, so now we get to sukkah. What laws does this apply to regarding sukkah? So regarding the height, that's going to be 20 high, and also for dofen akuma. Dofen akuma is a very important halacha that we use, in a lot of sukkot today. When you have like an overhang from a roof or a tree. So this says that you have a sukkah and have kosher schach in the middle, but on the sides is non-kosher schach. It's just, the ceiling, a roof or whatever, not made out of schach. So is this okay? Well, if the space from the wall to the kosher schach is less than 4 amot, then it's permitted, and we consider it dofen akuma, a crooked wall. It's as if the wall is just bent, and really the wall ends here, and so that's permitted as long as this is not too big. So you see that if you use bigger amot, and this is a kula, I use a smaller amot like we want to now of only 5 tefachim. This is going to be a chumrah. Okay, so that's okay. We're looking for chumrah because this rabbi is machmir on everything regarding these laws. So gobal dofen akuma, good. Hold on, there is another application of sukkah where if you use a smaller amah, you're going to lead to a leniency, and that's how big it has to be. How big the floor area. According to one opinion, it's 4 amot is the small 4 by 4 amot, 6 by 6 feet is the smallest sukkah. And so now if the amah is smaller, then smaller sukkah can also be smaller. The Tanah be omer ani kol sukkah she'en ba 4 amot pesula. So that's a question, right? So we 2 answers again. He can follow the other opinion that say the smallest sukkah of floor space is as long as it can fit your body, most of your body and your head, right? You just lie down in there and you eat. That's fine, even if your legs are sticking out. but that's a very much smaller sukkah, and that's not dependent on the amot. So therefore, it doesn't matter if you say amot is a smaller amma, will not affect this. Or maybe he does follow the B and thinks it has to be 4 by 4. And when he said use the smaller amma of 5 tefachim, he meant for most of the laws of sukkah, but not all of them. And this one also, he would be mahmir. He would use different ones for different things. Okay, and finally we get to kilayim, and we'll end with the kilayim case. So what does this apply to regarding kilayim? 2 cases. Let's read what they are. The clearing, the middle of a vineyard. Bet Shammai omrim 24 amot, Bet Hillel omrim 16 amot. Let's look at the picture. Right, so if I have a clearing, here's a vineyard, and I have a clearing in the middle, right? There's nothing there, so I want to plant something in the middle. So how much space do I need all around? How much space do I have to leave empty so that this is considered a separate area? And so we have 2 opinions of Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. And so here, if I use a smaller amma, that would be a kula. So that's why this sage says use a bigger amma, because it wants to be for chumrav. So for kilayim, we use a bigger amma. And what's mechol hakerem? Bet Shammai omrim 16 amma, Bet Hillel omrim 12 amma. The mechol hakerem is like in this picture here, where you have at the edge, not in the middle, but rather at the edge. Here's the end of the vineyard, and then I have a space until the end, and I want to plant something after that. How much space do I have to leave until I can plant something else? That's the machloket. So that's also going to be amma. Ezu kerachat hakerem, kerem sheharav emsaito, en sham 16 amot, lo yavi zera lesham. Hayu sham 16 amot, noten lo kedei avodato vezoreya hamotar. Right. So with the clearing in the vineyard, if there's less than 16 amot, I can't plant anything. If I have 16 or more, then I just leave enough space that I can work the land, which is usually 4 amot, and the leftover inside I can use. So mechol means the outside. Mechol means like a circle. This is the outside of it. And so en sham 12 amma lo yavi zera lesham. Hayu shetam 12 amma noten lo kedei avodato vezoreya et hashe'ar. So if I don't have less than 12 from the edge of the vineyard to the wall, I can't plant anything there. But if I have 12, then I leave 4 so that I can work on the vineyard, and the rest of it I can plant. Okay.
Rabbi.
Last point here. Hold on, even in kilayim, there is another law in which if I use the bigger amot, it's going to lead to a kula, and that is how much space is between each of the rows. If the rows are supposed to be spaced apart a lot, if they're too mushed together, then according to one opinion, it's not considered a vineyard because it's not planted nicely. Rabbi Shimon said, if it's all squished together, it's not considered a kerem, and there's no law of kilayim. Chachamim say it's still a kerem, and the ones that are too squished together, I'll make believe they're not there, and the rest of them that are left over, I'll just skip over, and those are 4 amot away each one, and it's okay. So Rabbanan or Mahmir here. So in this case, for Rabbi Shimon, the amount that they'll be squished together, if I use the bigger amma, I'm actually leading to a leniency. Well, I have 2 answers. I could say Kirabanan, then they have a kerem. I can follow Rabbanan, who say it doesn't matter, it's always a kerem, and I'll just make believe they're not there. Or it could even be Rabbi Shimon. And when he said that for vineyard, I use the bigger one, he means for most of the laws of Kerim, we use the bigger Amma, but not necessarily for all of them. And so, so now we so now we've established, but the statement of this paraita of the B, he says Sukkah is sorry, where is it? Right, so now we've established this statement of Ram Nachman that Amot for Sukkah Mavoy could be the smaller one, and the Amot for Kilayim are the bigger one. It applies to most of the cases. to be lechumra. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen. Amen.